obviously thinking again, and I thought it would be quite nice, quite preferable, perhaps, um, if I could touch someone's life, maybe your life. Um, Although I know that not everyone has the life that you do. I also feel it'd be preferable if we lived in a society where I could potentially give my heart away to a cause without having to think twice. That would be quite nice. But it seems that, especially now, more than ever, more than at least in recent times, there is a great lack of faith in one's fellow man, and I feel that needs to be restored before we can have any real large scale process. Blah blah, large scale progress. Yes, but yeah, um, a lot of the experience I've had in the past 6 months has helped like reiterate that to me. I feel the importance of integrity amongst other people, being able to rely on people to do their jobs or to put in an honest effort into things. This spreads into loads of things. It can be as simple as my mom trusting me to put some money in her bank account, or something large scale like, I don't know, trusting a company to build houses that are safe. And you can see obviously there's quite trivial manners in which this can be small damaging to, say, relationships, or massive where it can be damaging to the prestige of people. And that's ignoring, of course, the massive loss of life in stuff like Grenfell Tower or other issues like the Camberwell fire years prior. I think that's the most important thing. Essentially, we need to be able to believe in those who are in power. We need to be able to believe in those who we have little to no control over, whether we can choose to trust them or rely on them. Obviously the most obvious entity would be the state. Things like pensions or protections from exploitation, enforcement of equality, for example. It's important that everyone in the system does their job and can rely on each other so that we can plan for the future and we can stave off negative movements, such as like the the extreme movements of like populism, for example, the rise of extremists and extremist groups increasing in number due to the disenfranchisement of the average person, normally the working person, who has been forgotten about or let down or sold a false dream to by those who seek normally to only get into power without actually seeking to improve things, or come with their own ideology that about how economy may or may not work given certain things. Speaking of economy, of course, like a lot of things like economic policies do require some form of belief that humans will act in a certain way in accordance. The classic maybe question is things like trickle down economics, where the idea is by giving tax breaks. As far as I believe, that the simple idea is by giving like tax breaks or giving some kind of helping businesses free up money, that money will trickle down and that will allow them to create more jobs, which is like normally good for the economy. Normally, more jobs or increased wages, so that at least the current workers aren't trapped in a money trap. So maybe eventually those current workers can start moving up through the system and maybe acquire property, put money into things rather than having to take loans. They'd actually have the money up front to pay this money that's already been earned, rather than money trapped in loans for 25 years. So that frees up more money available and helps drive industry, and then these people with higher wages or with a wage at all will be able to spend some of their disposable income on other goods and services, therefore helping drive economy. Eventually this might mean more people can start their own business, or more businesses can thrive rather than just merely survive, and yada yada yada. Obviously, this relies upon the actual company investing the free money into the people that work for them and actually help to earn the profit. Along with the fact that these people work earnestly and all these other things, like these people actually do spend their money rather than just save it up. But yeah, outside of economics, obviously the key thing, especially when you come back to the state, is that it's very important, especially in terms of things like law enforcement, for example, that we can actually trust our police force, for example. So there's weird sides to this. There's the side of trusting the law enforcement to obviously not be like discriminatory, for example, or not use excessive force. There's that side. But then there's the other side of if there's an issue and people don't feel they can come to the police, this works seemingly in the hands of the criminal much more. Like if a potential criminal doesn't seem to really truly believe in the law and order system and believe that, you know, people do get justice served to them, someone who's already a potential criminal, or, you know, what's another word? Criminal curious? I don't know. May feel less, what's the word? Well, more inclined, but I wouldn't say more inclined, I'd feel less deterred from committing a given crime, given the fact that they have no faith in police force, so they have no faith in the enforcement of the law that they would be about to break. Of course, this leads to further corruption and whatnot, and, you know, the general degeneration of society, and so on. Speaking about my own experiences, going to places like Sierra Leone, for example, where there's a lot of gaps in the economy that could be filled, and a lot of people seem to have an earnest want to help improve the country, but really struggle to truly like trust their neighbor or trust family. They may be able to trust them to, you know, eat with or whatever, but outside of that, it's hard to trust people past that point. Trust people to set up a business with and hope that they don't run away with the money that you give them, or trust people to actually, you know, help you out or work for you and be reliable. You know, all these other big questions that come about, and this kind of weird negative side of nihilism. If people don't really care about or value life, you know, they often want value things like, you know, agreements, whether it be verbal or actual contractual agreements. It's hard to stick to that when you have a lack of faith in the integrity of your fellow man, fellow person, whatever, these things. Yeah, it's truly what I believe will be the biggest difficulty, along with the fact of people being very separated into, like, you know, going further extreme, and not only being extreme, but being unreconcilably extreme, not being able to have a conversation with the other, whatever that may be in a given society. Is on top of that, the integrity comes onto that. Like, I can't trust, for example, I can't trust Theresa May to do what, to be competent, for example. I can't trust, I don't know, Jeremy Corbyn to follow up on election promises, or I can't trust these things. Obviously, political examples are the most obvious ones. You can't trust a certain MP to not vote to bomb Syria, for example, or to really stick by and look into investing in infrastructure. I feel these are probably the most detrimental parts of society, like not being able to trust the other, not only for whatever issues you may have with them. You might see them as, I don't know, a bigot or a social justice warrior, but outside of that, not even be able to trust them to, you know, not run you over. But yeah, is there a decline in trust? I think there might be a further decline in trust, especially after things like Grenfell. And obviously this will only serve to make general society worse if people get more and more isolated. Often when people have trust issues, they get more isolated, or they try and trust people again and they often can never fully commit to trusting them. And then it kind of ends sour, and then it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of lack of trust, you know. And then, of course, there's a simple fact of it's really hard to trust people if they keep letting you down. Easy example is police brutality in the United States, for example. That's the easy one that comes to mind. So, you know, it's difficult. On top of that, I feel, going back to the police example, for example, analysis of like something like the London riots, I don't think would have occurred if people weren't at least angry enough and had little faith in the police to enforce things. You don't really have a riot unless people are really angry enough, or they just don't feel there'll be any repercussions because, you know, either everyone's doing it or simply there weren't enough police numbers to stop people. So it kind of steamrolled in that way. So in the same way, I'd see something like, I would understand if something like the way working class people were quite forgotten about and quite ignored. Understandable, of course not justifiable, understandable if there was an increase in something like petty crime, for example, minor robbery, minor damage, minor vandalism, that kind of thing, because if a person doesn't feel valued and, you know, invested in any way, shape or form, and people don't really listen to their opinions and listen to their issues, even issues that are life and death situations. We're not talking about, oh, it'd be nice if I could earn £9 an hour. We're talking about it'd be nice if I could live in a safe house. If people don't even listen to these issues, then of course, you know, faith in, you know, the government or any form of state or government body drops to low, you know. So be understandable if there's a rise in petty crime. In the same way, if you extrapolate that further and say the case of Mark Duggan that led to the small outbreak of riot in Tottenham, had the copycat riots around because people of the similar like socio-economic strata, you know, who had no real connection to the communities did riot. Of course, this causes only damage to one's own community, compared to, say, when some of the residents and some of the protesters did go to the Kensington and Chelsea building, and then obviously, you know, that's quite vandalism, and obviously a lot of people had this whole debate where it was like, violence normally isn't the answer, but then normally I do lean towards that way, but then in this way it was more of a case of people died because you didn't listen. And it may feel, obviously, to a person like that, the only way you will listen is if I do come to your door and smash it up. And this is exactly what I mean. Like, you don't do that unless you're angry enough, or you just truly have no connection anyway. So you don't really care about doing damage because, you know. I made some other points, I believe. Is that it? Yeah. One more thing is, people need to take public responsibility, and that comes into the trust thing. Upholding your part of the social contract. If you're an elected official, you take responsibility for the good and the bad. And I'd say it's important to broadcast it. If you've done something good, you broadcast it. You know, have some form of accountability statement, say once every month, is what I would appeal for. So you can keep the integrity going and say, okay, we sought to achieve this, we didn't achieve this. This is why. Or was it because of we donated some of our money to foreign aid? Or was it because of a certain massive change in economics? I don't know. The euro got really weak, so that may have affected some European businesses that we relied upon. You know, you can shift the blame, but at the end of the day, you have to take responsibility. I think that's the biggest thing. Not only integrity and faith, but take responsibility for what you've done, you know, and say, oh, this is my part that I've played in this issue. It might be, oh, I didn't, for example, the easiest one for the state in Grenfell is, oh, they didn't send people to inspect whether or not the cladding was actually safe. Or is there any form of inspecting or government body that inspects these things like safety checks in the same way, I don't know, Ofsted inspect schools and make sure schools are being run safely and, you know, it's being exploited and, you know, children are learning and developing as people. You know, at least that's the hope. That's what they're expecting, not just to pass exams. I think it's the key thing. The government has to take, the governing bodies have to take responsibility for not checking up on the private people that they rented out. But of course, the private people rented out using the cladding is obviously where the biggest blame lies. But everyone has to take their slice of this responsibility cake, and that's probably what annoys people the most. Not only have people died, there's that, which is already a tragedy in itself, but something that's completely preventable, but no one's taking responsibility for it, and for lacking to prevent it is travesty, and it's really embarrassing. On top of everything else, you know, on top of the natural damage of the lives that's cost, but until the long-term damage caused by the lack of faith, which takes a lot longer to heal. Well, both as long. I didn't mean it that way. I mean, as in, you know, take much more than centuries to heal. This lack of faith that perpetuates this, which makes it even worse, and therefore connection between government. And then it might come a point where people might have an issue with their house, or say the water's leaking, and say, oh, why bother? They won't listen to me anyway. And then this is where you start getting the real class divides and everything that starts to perpetuate, you know, the worst things in our society, be it, you know, extremist populism, or, you know, homegrown terrorism. You can have these weird links. If people, or, you know, petty crime, fraud, these things, like, you can link a lot of these things indirectly or slightly directly, like at least partially, to the connection between the person and the state. You know, because people don't really rob stores if they know the boss man. You know, if they have a connection with him and they feel, oh, he gives half a fuck about me. You know, it's the whole thing. If I give half a fuck and you give half a fuck, then we can all give a fuck about a country. Excuse the language, you know. How dare I say country? I mean nation state. My apologies. But yeah, gotta have faith in it.